back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk with me on this Tuesday afternoon. And no game for Georgia this weekend, but that doesn't mean we lack things to talk about. We've got a lot to discuss on today's episode. We're going to recap the Ole Miss game, give our final thoughts from that matchup. We're going to talk about what Kirby Smart and players had to say on Tuesday. Had a chance to talk to Kirby and a couple of players as they worked through the bye week. Some of the discussion out of that, some of the things they shared. We're going to talk about some good recruiting news, some bad recruiting news for Georgia over the weekend. We'll also get into some Georgia basketball, and we'll talk about a coaching vacancy for a team that the Georgia Bulldogs will see very, very soon. But guys, let's start with the Week 8 win over Ole Miss. Georgia won at 43-35. You guys did such a great job recapping the game, giving your final thoughts. On Saturday night, I popped in just for a few minutes before I headed back up. But we've had a few more days to think about this game, a few opportunities to go back, look back at the game, and get a feel and learn a little bit from what was another game where I hand up. I was in that fourth quarter trying to make sense of what exactly it was I was seeing. But Ben, we've had a few days removed now. What still sort of stuck with you from this win for Georgia and just how they were able to get it done against Ole Miss?
Well, I think the more I've looked at this game, the more impressed I was with Gunnar Stockton. And I was already really impressed with Gunnar Stockton. I think I tweeted Gunnar Stockton was so damn good was my first tweet immediately after the game. And I think I'm even more impressed by him now after the rewatch and diving deeper into some of the statistics from the game. We've seen him now. After I spent an offseason saying he wasn't the type of quarterback that could go and win you games if you're trailing, that he's the type of quarterback that can get the job done, isn't going to make mistakes, is going to be able to sit on leads when you're playing from ahead. Well, he's gone and done it now 2 times in big-time SEC games against Tennessee and Ole Miss when Georgia absolutely had to have it in second halves. And so, he shut me up in that regard. I think he shut a lot of people up in that regard. And I think that, look, at a certain point, there's guys that get it and guys that don't. And so much gets talked about, and I've been guilty of this, like the talented passers or throwers of the football in college football, not necessarily always aligning with whatever identity traits are required to win in college football. And whatever that is, Gunnar Stockton has that. And when he needs big time throws, he makes big time throws. It's the little things with a low snap on the field goal. It's the little things with a high snap on the 22-yard touchdown run. He doesn't throw an incompletion the entire second half of that game when you're trailing by 9 for a lot of it. Just, he's a different kind of guy. And I think that, in today's age in college football, you're spending a top dollar for the type of quarterback that most programs want, and to be able to have a guy like that that's sort of hung around and he just gets what the identity of your program is. I think that Ole Miss game encapsulated that more than any game possibly could. And I think that, you understand really now after seeing Tennessee and seeing Ole Miss, why there is just such a, unfazed belief in Gunnar Stockton from everybody inside that building.
Yeah, they were telling us from, I think that was week 3 against Tennessee, oh, this guy's a dog, and then for him to not only, play through that oblique injury that had him limited to start the week, but, fantastic game. I want to share the stat that Anthony Dasher from UGAsports.com tweeted. Gunnar Stockton, the first quarterback to go 12 for 12 or better in a half against an Associated Press top 5 opponent since Cal's Aaron Rodgers did it against number 1 USC in 2004. That's just unreal. Was going to share some of the awards he's gotten. Kipp had a great thread on our board with this. Maxwell Award Player of the Week, Davey O'Brien National Quarterback of the Week. Looking at some of these other ones, the NCFFAA Gridiron Offensive National Player of the Week, Manning Award Star of the Week, just an unbelievable amount of awards and rightly deserved. He had a fantastic game and yeah, he just did all the little things right. The thing that I think keeps getting overlooked at times And he just does not turn the football over. He's still only got one interception at this point in the season. He's had a few fumbles. I think about the one against Tennessee, but man, what a fantastic job he's done taking care of the ball, and he deserves a lot of credit. And, I was going to bring this up too. A lot of the conversation, and we talked about it just a little on the Saturday podcast. Georgia fans were feeling really good after the Carson Beck game against Louisville. Struggling against Miami. Struggling for Miami, throwing those interceptions. And I understand the frustration from Georgia fans when it comes to Carson, how that all played out. But I've maintained, even going back to the summer, that this was a situation where maybe it can work out for everybody involved. And I think by what we're seeing right now, I think we're on the trajectory for that to happen. Carson Beck could still wind up being part of this Heisman conversation. Miami's still very much in the playoff race, and Georgia is rolling right along with Gunnar Stockton, and they're in the hunt. And Gunnar may wind up playing himself into Heisman consideration as well. He might have done that against Ole Miss. Kipp, anything you want to add from the Ole Miss game? Anything that sort of stuck with you the last few days?
I think just as big of a question mark as far as where Gunnar Stockton would be as a quarterback in the SEC was, can he actually run against SEC defenders? Like, we knew he was going to be a hard-nosed runner. Everyone talked about that. And we still are talking about the fact that that's just the kind of guy he is. He's not afraid of contact, but can he make defenders miss? Or is he just going to run into contact? Is he just going to try to be a fullback out there? And I mean, he is taking more hits than Kirby Smart would like. I know that the stress level there is a little bit high. But he also had the longest run from scrimmage against Ole Miss. And he came into that matchup with everyone talking about Trinidad Chambliss. I mean, he's a dangerous runner. One of the top 3 running quarterbacks in the SEC coming in this game. But then at the end of the day, Gunnar Stockton's got another 59 yards. He's averaging 6 a clip in that game. And obviously that keeper for the 22-yard touchdown, I mean, that was, the highlight play of the game. And I think it showed us, okay, I mean, he got the angle there and again, got to the end zone. I think that was just kind of that eye-opening moment where he's probably going to be good for 45 to 50 every single week. He's got a chance to run for 500 yards and is, like third in the SEC in rushing touchdowns right now. So I think this is a situation where you can end up with 500 yards, 15 rushing touchdowns on the season. And I don't think that is something that, if we're going back and looking at our preseason projections, I don't think any of us had him having that kind of an impact in the run game. And that opens up the rest of the offense. It's just completely something that he's proven to everyone at this point. He's played enough defenses, enough SEC teams to where you could say, okay, he's one of the better running quarterbacks in the country.
Yeah, he did a fantastic job, and I want to shout out Jake Rowe from Dogs HQ. He was sitting with us during that game, and that touchdown run he had, he corralled the ball and kind of stuck it out in front of him to keep a defender from getting his hands on it. It was a really heads-up play by Gunnar. Other things that stood out to me, I can't remember, and I wasn't around to listen to y'all's entire podcast. Man, what a run by Josh McCray on that 4th down. We watched it live, and I mean, I don't know about you, Ben. I thought he was stuffed. Wasn't going to have a shot at converting. They don't get that. That's another play where Georgia might lose if they do not convert there, because 4th and 1, and they had not gotten a stop yet of Ole Miss. Kirby talked about this a little bit on Tuesday, but 2nd down was a big problem for Georgia in the game as far as defensively. They gave up a ton of plays. I wrote about it in my five plays that changed the game. Ole Miss averaged something like 10.3 yards per 2nd down. Now, some of the number was a little inflated because one of those was a 75-yard touchdown, but there was another one that went for like 31. 2nd down gave Georgia a lot of issues, and it put them, they would do a good job on 1st down, maybe give up a little bit of yardage or maybe get a stop, and then it was like 2nd down, they just gave it right back and made 3rd down easy. And that's sort of been a talking point for Kirby when he's talked about this defense, is just, well, what is the situation on 3rd down? And against Ole Miss, they really struggled to put them in tough 3rd downs. He said that they were really good on 3rd and long against Ole Miss. They just didn't get enough of those, and that was an issue. Elsewhere, shout out, man, some of the guys on defense that stood up and made plays late. Xavier McLeod, Josh Horton with pass deflections. DeMello Jones, man, that was a fantastic play to break up the pass to force. I think that might have been the last of the 2 punts by Ole Miss. He never really gets his head around, but he reads the receiver getting ready to catch the ball, and he sticks his left hand out to break up the pass and get Ole Miss off the field. Elsewhere, thought the offensive line played really well. I mean, to have a lineup back like they did, I think that was the same starting lineup they had against Tennessee. There was only one other time that lineup had all been together, but getting those guys back, and the point that we made also at the end of my time on Saturday's podcast, just a well-timed bye week. Try to get some of those offensive linemen healthy. Gives you another week to get things figured out, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later. What you're going to do without Colby Young being available. Man, how nice is it to have a week where you can kind of focus on that. You can get guys more opportunities. They don't have to be solely focused on an opponent. They can try to kind of go back to the drawing board knowing that they need someone to step up at the X position because, man, Colby Young was huge. All right, we're going to get into what Kirby Smart and some of the players had to say on Tuesday. They gave us an opportunity to talk to Kirby, to talk to left tackle Monroe Freeling, and also talk to cornerback DeMello Jones. All three very good. Would highly encourage y'all to watch all of those. But wanted to start with Kirby Smart talking about Colby Young and what he's expecting from Colby. Kirby didn't really give us an update, as surprising as that might be. Someone asked about Colby, Kyron Jones, Talon Taylor, and he said, yeah, they're going to be out. So not very detailed, but he was asked when it came to Colby, basically what his expectations were for him as he's out, and unclear if he will be able to return. This is what Kirby had to say.
Expectations of him first and foremost were to take care of his foot, leg, his ankle. He is an incredible kid. What he's meant to this team, because I think his experience the year before to know what he missed out on, and to see his work ethic to get back, his leadership throughout camp, his willingness to do anything to help the team. He had the best camp I think any receiver's ever had since I've been at Georgia, in terms of day one to practice 25 before the first game. The physicality, the ownership, the accountability, the willingness to play positions, and then it was slowly coming out in the season with his play. We found that he was one of the hardest guys to tackle, so his touches went up. He was the best point of attack blocker. He was the best vertical guy, and it's unfortunate that it happened. It's part of football. I reassured him that his work that he put in was noticed, and that's what he can control. Now he has to control getting healthy.
I'll start with you, Kipp. How concerned are you about this offense going forward, knowing that it's highly unlikely we're going to see Colby Young back anytime soon?
I think the one aspect that maybe hasn't been talked about enough this season was how physical of a blocker Colby Young was. He brought an aspect to the perimeter blocking that they were missing last season and helped out a lot in that area. So I think just simply saying that you're plugging Noah Thomas into that spot and getting the same production is very presumptuous there. He's going to get that opportunity, and it's great that you have a guy who has physicality in Dylan Bell, who's going to be able to help out there as well. But I think when we're talking about the timing of this, the bye week is just crucial here, because he was going into this game as Georgia's leading receiver for a reason. And I think that's a different skill set that you might not be able to completely replace. And so this is a situation where, and I think it's interesting that, and well timed that someone asked Kirby Smart about him today, but this is where CJ Wiley has a chance to make a move. You have to go in this and basically re-audition everyone and give everyone an opportunity, because those snaps have to go somewhere. Now, you saw in the game how great it is to have outstanding tight ends who can adjust and make an impact in that area. And I think Lawson Licky and Oscar Delp are going to continue to get more targets. But I think this is a situation where you're not going to completely replace Colby Young. You're going to spread out his reps and his targets and his responsibility. And I do like the makeup of this roster at that position when you have, again, a guy like Dylan Bell, a guy who's practicing really hard, and Noah Thomas, and played over 50 snaps in that game, and your tight ends. So I think you're going to be able to spread it around, but it's still a big loss because, again, Gunnar Stockton and them had a lot of chemistry, and they had made a lot of plays so far in the season.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the tight ends because, was it a coincidence that they used them more with Colby Young out? It's hard to say for sure, but man, they were super effective, and you would hope that you'd see more of that too. Dylan Bell, yeah, I think we could see some more of Dylan. Interested to see Noah. He played quite a bit, but he did not have a catch in that game. I think he had one that was erased on an OPI. But you would think that he would be one of the top candidates to fill that spot. And two, CJ Wiley, a guy that's young but has a lot of potential. Ben, what do you think about this offense without Colby Young? How concerned are you about the job they're going to do and the ability to replace who was a very, very productive receiver? He was Georgia's second leading receiver on the season when he got hurt.
Kirby saying that he had the best camp of any wide receiver he's ever had is quite a statement for Kirby Smart to make. And I know that, Kirby Smart has always been one of Colby Young's biggest supporters, especially what he brings from an energy standpoint to the program, from a leadership standpoint to the program. I would be surprised if we ever see Colby Young play for Georgia again. And I think that we saw last season what happened to Georgia's offense when Colby Young was no longer available. I think that you're able to at least see a little more light at the end of the tunnel this time around because Georgia was able to score 43 points after Colby Young went down on Saturday. And so you can at least say you've seen Georgia score points without Colby Young against a top 5 opponent. It's going to change this offense. I mean, Kipp brings up the perimeter blocking. I think the one thing that Kirby Smart brought up today that they started incorporating more over the last few weeks, he's really hard to tackle after the catch. And I think that you don't think about that as much. Like you don't think about the 6'3", 6'4", 50-50 ball type of guy being someone you get involved in the screen game, but they were doing that. And we've seen him, make defenders make contact with him 1-2 yards after scrimmage and almost pick up the first down with his ability to just keep moving after contact. And so you're going to have to figure out who's that going to be. I know a lot of people are going to point to Noah Thomas. He's gotten a lot of snaps so far this year, even though he hasn't been targeted so much in those snaps. That snap count is certainly going to go up. I think you probably see, because of how well he's been playing and how versatile he is right now, you probably see Dylan Bell get used in some of those spots a little bit more. I know that they have the luxury of moving him around to all the various wide receiver spots, and I think that he's someone that they would plug in there. Of course, CJ Wiley is going to be a name that's going to come up more regularly. I found it very interesting today that when Kirby Smart was talking about the freshman, he acknowledged, it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, CJ Wiley has not been on scout team as much, so he hasn't actually been getting as many reps as some of those scout team guys probably have. That said, he's been doing enough during his time at Georgia that he's been in the main rotation when they've been repping the 1s and the 2s with wide receivers in practice. And so, you get a bye week. This is a big opportunity. You have Talon Taylor out. You have Colby Young out. You need some other guys to step up there in the receiver room. And so, like Kirby said, it's the nature of it. That's football. It's especially a bummer just because of how the play unfolded. Like Gunnar drops a dime. He runs a beautiful route. He could have probably just ran out of bounds along the sideline right there with the nature of how the play unfolded. And he said, I think I can get a few extra. He does get a few extra, and the defender's having to kind of grab him from behind. So, and he didn't even notice it right away. It didn't seem like he got up, celebrated. I don't know exactly at what point he started to recognize the pain of it all, but it's definitely a blow, but at least we've seen Georgia prove it can move the ball offensively pretty well even without him.
Yeah, he was off to a great start of this season. And even when he was on the sideline being looked at, he winds up jogging into the locker room. So you kind of held out hope, but doesn't look good there. Hopefully he can work back. And, who knows? Maybe if Georgia makes a playoff run, there's a window for Colby Young to come back. Well, as you would imagine, with this being the bye week, a lot of the conversation on Tuesday was about improvement, getting healthier, getting better. And I thought this was really interesting. Kirby was asked at one point about the secondary, some of the struggles we've seen. And did Kirby feel like some of the things needed to be coached better? Was it execution? What exactly has been the disconnect? And as you guys would probably be surprised to know, Kirby pushed back. But I do think there was a lot of good insight when he pushed back. That's what Kirby shared.
I don't see it like you guys do. I don't see it as totally a secondary issue. Might be for the fan, the average fan, or whoever just looks out there. I just don't look at it as it's completely a secondary issue. There's a lot of factors into things that we can improve on, and we're going to improve on. We're going to keep getting better. We had, I think, 9 or 10 of the first 29 plays were 2nd and 7 or greater. I don't know. I've coached in many games that you hold a really good offense to 2nd and 7 greater 9 times. The issue is you lose those every time, and you don't get any 3rd and longs. We were 100% on 3rd and 8 or greater the other day. We just didn't get enough of them. So you have to find ways to do that and do that well. I mean, the opening drive, you go through the opening drive, we have a 3rd and 7, in which we have a bang-bang man-to-man play. You have a 3rd and 4, we have an error on. Then you have a 3rd and 7 where we have an unblocked player into a quarterback draw. Like, you got to be really careful how you do things and what you respond to in terms of, are we getting better at us and what we do? Are we getting better at tackling? Are we getting better at free access? Are we getting better at 2nd long so that we have more 3rd long? There's so many things that go into it that we got to improve on. But I don't look at it and say, oh, we got a poor secondary. I don't think that at all. I think we've got really good cover guys, and we got to put them in situations to be able to be successful.
There's nothing like getting Kirby Smart when he starts getting animated and you start seeing the faces and when he's really putting the emphasis on certain words. But I think there's a lot of truth to what he's saying, and I can't help but think back to the 2022 Peach Bowl. And, you think about that first half, and so many people were like, oh my God, this secondary is just getting torn apart. And, they didn't play great. But, I remember the conversations in that press box being like, yeah, man, C.J. Stroud's got 8 seconds to throw the ball. Of course, he's going to be able to fire downfield and find like a Marvin Harrison. I wanted y'all's opinion on how Kirby looked at that. To me, it isn't just the secondary, and we saw those guys make plays late. But Kipp, do you agree with sort of his stance on, the secondary's had its issues, but it's not their problem alone?
I often laugh at him because you're going to get a contrarian answer almost every time. So it's like you got to ask him the opposite just to get him to maybe give the answer that he feels is the truth half the time. This time, I completely believe him. I think on one side, they're playing off coverage the entire game. Everyone kind of sees it and they're like, has Georgia ever played this far off the ball before? And there's truth to that, but I think there's reasons for that. And it's because he's basically got at least one of his corners on the field. When Ellis and DeMello are on the field at the same time, he got both. He's got the training wheels protocol on for these guys, and he's trying to make sure that these guys grow in confidence, making sure that they have their guys staying in front of them. And yeah, if you tackle in space better and you don't give up a 75-yard touchdown, maybe the numbers look a little bit better. At the end of the day, the defensive line is not playing up to the Georgia standard. And you can get into whether it's talent or, just execution, but they're just not. That's the bottom line. And these are guys that are going to get better. I think Elijah Griffin is further along now than, Jalen Carter was his freshman year, even if the numbers don't really dictate it. I think he's playing a ton of football. He's going to be really good. Ellis Robinson and DeMello Jones, they're going to be really good toward the end of the year as well. bringing in Ja'Cory Thomas, I thought he played fine out there. So I think there are signs for the second half to where you're like, okay, they are going to be able to play better. But as long as they're just not impacting the offensive backfield, there is a ceiling for this defense. And you could say it's personnel. I think it's largely personnel because they don't have that NFL talent that they did. And that you can call that an excuse. But again, at the same time, not having a Damon Wilson out there, not having a Tyrion Ingram Dawkins out there is having an impact. But yeah, Glenn Schumann and the defensive coaching staff has to do a better job preparing them as well. The game plans have to improve. If you look at the second half and we see all the success they have, then yeah, everyone watching is going to be like, then you just proved that you can do this for half of every football game. So I think it's a little bit of both right now, but I agree with them. I think the secondary is going to play a lot better toward the end of the season, but I think how well they can play is still going to be dictated by the defensive front.
The thing that I thought of when it came to the point Kirby made, and, if he was being honest, is the fact that they really haven't moved personnel around a ton. I mean, Daniel Harris has kind of been shuffled out, but other than that, I mean, they've stuck with, Janelle Aguero and, Kyron Jones goes out because of injury, but he would have still been starting there. I think if they were really worried about the state of the secondary, they would have tinkered, Adrian Maddox and some of the other guys, Jaden Harris, they just haven't really been factors. I think if they thought Zion Branch as well, I think if they would have thought, man, these guys just aren't getting it done, we would have at least seen, essentially a cameo from some of these guys, like throwing them out there to see. But no, I think that Kirby was actually shooting us pretty straight on that one. Ben, what do you make of it?
I mean, I definitely don't think that the secondary is the lone issue with the defense. You don't give up 5 touchdowns in 5 possessions because of one unit of your defense having issues. So, I think that there are elements of all of this defense that are not quite up to the best standard of what we've seen with certain Georgia defenses. I think Kipp brought a big one up with the defensive front. And, quite frankly, we talked about this all offseason, it being a young, inexperienced, unproven defensive front. And I remember after the Austin Peay game, Georgia had been pretty dominant defensively up to that point through 2 weeks. I remember saying on that post-game podcast, well, I guess I was wrong about my take in the offseason that they're young and inexperienced. And I think that we started to see that show itself more now that we've gotten into SEC play. And Kirby Smart brought it up today that Elijah Griffin's around 3rd in snap count defensively. That's great for Elijah Griffin and his development and long-term and all of that. It's also not the most optimistic sign that you're having to play a true freshman that many snaps on your defense. And so I think when you look at guys like him, Joseph Jonah Ajonye, they're still really, really young. And there is a lot of opportunity for them in the future to become those guys that we talk about when we're talking about Georgia defenses. I think that you look at some young transfer portal guys, Xavier McLeod, Josh Horton, guys that have a lot of eligibility left. Like, there is future upside for this defensive line, but I think you have to be realistic about what it is truly possible with this defensive line this season, just with the bodies and just with the youth that you have. Sure, you're going to get incrementally better every single week. And as you get deeper into the season, into a playoff run, those guys are going to not be freshmen so much, but they're still going to be young. They're still going to be inexperienced. Their bodies still aren't going to be fully formed to what they're going to be by the time that they graduate from Georgia. And so there's still a lot to do there. I mean, I think the linebackers, as much as we've raved about CJ Allen and Raylan Wilson and Chris Cole, like, I think that they still have a tendency to be gotten in coverage at times by opposing tight ends, especially. And so, look, nobody is infallible on this defense right now. That goes all the way to the top. That goes to Glenn Schumann. That goes to Kirby Smart. Like, I don't think that anybody in Athens right now is sitting there saying there's anything to be proud or happy about with the defensive side of the ball after what happened against Ole Miss. I just think that there's a tendency. Like, I think of it this way. You go into a game against Ole Miss and you say, how many yards is Ole Miss going to throw for? And you'll still feel okay about it. And chances are you're going to say 200, 230 yards. Like, it's not great, but you're playing Ole Miss. You're playing a good offense. You're playing Lane Kiffin. You're playing a guy like Trinidad Chambliss that's been solid. And you say, all right, 200, 230 yards, whatever. if you really look at that throughout the course of the game, corners are going to look bad so many times through the course of that game if that quarterback's going to get to 200, 230 yards passing. Yet you knew before the game you were okay with that quarterback having 200, 230 yards passing. And so sometimes they'll outperform that and you'll be a little bit dissatisfied because they outperform that. But at a certain point, like, yeah, if the opposing team's going to throw for 200 or so, which is bound to happen against good SEC offenses, yeah, some players in your secondary are going to get got at points throughout the game. And that's just the way that it's going to be. It's very easy to look and say, oh, number 1 was closest to the ball on that. Oh, number 6 was closest to the ball on that. Number 8 was closest to the ball on that, and point a finger on them because you were able to see it so visibly at the end of the play. But so much goes into it that I don't think Kirby's looking at it in that regard. And I did find it funny. It feels like he's already done the role reversal where people are now poking holes in defensive questions. And he's like, well, look, I've got questions about the offense too. I know you look and say they don't punt, but I mean, the offense isn't perfect. And it's like, I feel like he was having to do the exact opposite of that for the last 10, 12 months. So it's just a funny little bye-week role change.
Yeah, the shoe was on the other foot there, but nobody's better at flipping the question around than Kirby Smart. I can promise you that. Kipp mentioned earlier Gunner taking hits, what he's done. We talked about him getting banged up during the Auburn game and fighting through it. I thought this clip was really good of Monroe Freeling, the left tackle, talking about Gunner and him taking the hits. Here is what Monroe had to say.
Yeah, you said it, like everyone else is hurt, but knowing that our quarterback, I think he's gotten a lot better at not taking those big hits. The Kentucky game, I remember I got hurt and I was in the locker room watching the game and I saw him go like for a scramble for a first down. He was going and I saw him take a slide and I was like, that's the smartest decision I've seen Gunner make so far this season. And I think it really helps when you know that someone's hurt and that they're fighting for the team and that they really care. And I know Gunner had that oblique injury or something and he was hurt in the game, I could tell, but he's going out there and fighting for the team and that really fires everybody up when they're putting the body on the line.
When they talk about, when we've talked to players and they say Gunner's a dog, to me that clip right there, basically summed up what they mean, the way he fights through. And I think it's fair too, guys, to consider that he, at the college level, he's not used to taking hits. Think about, this is his first full year as a starter. All that time at practice, he's in that non-contact jersey, so there's only so much he could really have done to prepare for this. But to me, it seems like he is learning, and that Kentucky play is a great example that Monroe brought up, where he took off and he gained about 20 yards, and then he realized, all right, I better get down because I'm about to get nailed. Ben, I've been impressed with the job he's done learning to avoid those hits and getting, being more smart with, when he chooses to try to keep going versus getting down. I don't know how you feel. I do think he's gotten better in that regard.
I do. He's still a competitor by nature. So there's going to be a couple moments throughout the rest of this season where he feels he needs a yard or he thinks that he's going to be able to break down a DB and make him miss a tackle or something like that. And he's just not. And that's just how Gunner Stockton plays. And that's the way it is. Sometimes it'll work. Sometimes it won't. But he is, I doubt this is the last time that we're having a conversation about Gunner Stockton, having a forcible contact with another defensive player or having a acrobatic fall or whatever that may be. But there's no question about it. Like what Gunner Stockton has been able to do with his legs and his savvy this season is a big reason why Georgia is as effective as it is offensively right now.
I was going to read part of another quote where Monroe was asked, do you ever just tell him, are you nuts? Like taking these hits, and the quote, he'll take them, he gets back up, shakes his head a little bit, comes back in the huddle, and then starts screaming at us again. So the dude he said that, he away from football, he's, doesn't say a lot, happy-go-lucky. He said out there on the field, man, he is a field general. And Kipp, I don't know if you're with us on how he's done trying to manage these hits, but, it's pretty clear to me that he's going to lay it all out on the line, even if it's Marshall, Austin P, and he's going to give it everything he's got, no matter what is going on.
Yeah, the Gunner Stockton era at Georgia began with him, taking the hit of hits. I think that's the way his football playing career will probably end. He'll probably leave it all there in the field, whether it's at Georgia or the NFL. That's just the kind of player that he is. And it also kind of goes back to what Kirby said today, just about reps. There's just nothing like live reps. And the one thing you don't get to do, in practice as a quarterback is take hits. And so I think, that's the one that, like, on a week-to-week basis, like, has Gunnar Stockton had to play through an oblique injury before? Maybe not, because he hasn't really, since at least, his days at Tiger, Georgia for Rabun County, because he's not taking hits. He just spent multiple years in the Georgia program not taking hits on a weekly basis. And all of a sudden you're out there, in SEC play, and you're getting kind of lit up. And so you have to remember that he's still a first-year starter. And just like I said about the defense, and I think that's where they're going to improve, is because I think that's the key area for Georgia's tackling. They're starting to have some tackling issues, and I think that's the one thing you can't really get in practice versus live reps. But that's the thing with Gunnar, is these live reps are going to help him learn, okay, you know what? I don't get that angle most of the time whenever I'm trying to get to the second level. And I know when I can make it to the sideline or when I need to slide. He's got a little bit more data points. And I'm sure the coaches have showed him in film room, like, Gunnar, you're more often than not, you're going to get hit if you try to get, this 8-yard play to 12. Take the 8. So those are real data points that are valuable to them going into the bye, going into the second half. You kind of know which plays are going to work for how many yards, and he's going to be able to avoid some of those hits. But at the same time, you have a running quarterback. Another thing Kirby talked about today is now everybody's got a running quarterback. It's just a part of the offense that I think we're talking about Georgia very differently, because they just scored 43 points. But you're looking at the upside to this offense, to having Gunnar Stockton as offense, is you got to let him go out there and backyard ball a little bit to stay unpredictable and to open things up for all of his teammates.
Yeah, I think he's done everything asked of him, and he's got, man, I know one thing, he's fun to watch. You just never know what exactly is going to happen. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some good recruiting news, some bad recruiting news for Georgia. We're going to talk about the coaching carousel check-in that we do, and start with a team that Georgia is going to see the next time they are playing on a Saturday. And then we'll finish things up with a little Georgia basketball. All right, guys, getting back into the recruiting side of things, the Georgia Bulldogs got some good news when it came to the 2028 class, wound up getting some bad news with the 2026 class. Ben, I'll set it up for you. Would you rather start with the good news or the bad news? First, you have to unmute, and then...
I'm coughing over here. I muted myself right before we got to the end of the break, and then, of course, I make that mistake. That's 2 podcasts in a row I've done that, by the way. I did that on the post-game show as well. I'll start with the bad news because it's more imminent. Corey Howard, defensive lineman from Valdosta, flips from Georgia to Alabama. I know it's going to sting on multiple levels. It stings because you're losing a defensive lineman. It stings because you're losing a recruit, period. It stings because he's flipping to Alabama, who's the only team that you seem to not be able to beat on the field. And now you've lost some recruiting battles this cycle to them with Corey Howard, with Jared Dowdy recently, with Jordan Edmonds. So they certainly have had their fair share of head-to-head recruiting wins against Georgia in this recruiting cycle. This is a guy that Georgia, I would describe him as a camp eval, developmental piece in Georgia's 2026 recruiting class when he committed to Georgia in June. He camped at the very beginning of June, earned the offer, scheduled the official visit for the end of the month, ends up committing to Georgia, really in that time frame. And he's a, traitsy potential upside defensive lineman. So I think, Georgia really liked what they saw from him when he camped and what they thought he could become. It's also probably not a, talent profile that you're going to, break the bank for necessarily. And so if he ends up preferring Alabama, or Alabama ends up presenting him with something that you're not able to match, like that's something that you're probably just going to choose to live with, especially when you consider some of the other pieces on the defensive line. I mean, Valdon Stone is such an important piece for Georgia to be able to get signed in this class. Carter Lucky is someone that's had a really good senior season up to this point as well. And you want to, you're going to be able to, you're not gonna have any trouble holding on to Carter Lucky, but you know that is going to be a key piece of this defensive line as well. I would think that Georgia will probably try to find something on the, whether it's on the defensive line or at edge down the stretch in the 2026 class. I think that Georgia will try to do something. I mean, there have been some guys that have come on visits so far this season that were in the 2026 class. There are people that recently reclassified to the 2026 class that are big time names. So I think that there are conversations that now need to be had for Georgia leading up to December in terms of who do you prioritize to fill out that defensive front. You don't necessarily just think of it as defensive end or defensive tackle or outside linebacker. It's just you need difference makers on the defensive front in this class. You've got a couple already. Who else is still out there that you could go get? That will be the conversation that Georgia has now for the next month and a half before signing day.
All right, let's get to the good news. When it came to 2028, the Bulldogs picking up a familiar name in that class.
Yeah, well, I want to say one thing. Sometimes when, I'll start with who we're talking about here. 2028 tight end, Asa Wall, John Millage Academy in Milledgeville, Georgia. He is a legacy recruit. His dad, JT Wall, and Kipp, I'm sure, can probably fill us in on the illustrious career of JT Wall more than I might even be able to. But someone who clearly was going to be close to impossible to end up anywhere other than Georgia, if we're just calling it what it is. He's visited for every single home game this season. His dad being a former fullback at Georgia, hardworking, beloved Georgia Bulldog type. Naturally, that's ingrained into Asa. And we had a sense that it was going to happen sooner rather than later, even though he's a 2028 recruit. And it was never really a question of where he was going to end up. What I will say is, do not think of this as a legacy recruit, future guy that, Georgia will, maybe, try and hold on to, whatever, like it's family connections. No, this is someone that Georgia thinks is the real deal as a tight end in the 2028 class. Go through on the film. He doesn't play GHSA ball. He plays GIAA ball. So the competition discrepancy is very noticeable when you turn on the tape. But this is a well put together high school sophomore right now. It shouldn't surprise you that his dad was a college football player when you see the athletic background that he clearly has, plays on both sides of the ball. Georgia had two really big tight ends in town this weekend, Brock Williams in the 2027 class, and then Asa Wall in the 2028 class. And I'll tell you right now, there's not probably any tight ends in any recruiting class right now that Georgia thinks of more highly than both of those guys. I think Brock Williams and Asa Wall, class aside, 26 class, 27 class, 28 class, they're right there at the top in terms of how Georgia views them talent-wise. So, yes, this is a legacy recruit. Yes, Todd Hartley operates in a different world than everybody else because he has Elias Williams committed for 2 years. He's got Ethan Barbour committed for a year and a half. He's going to have Lincoln Keys committed for a year and a half. And he's already got a 2028 recruit committed that, again, probably wanted to go to Georgia no matter what anyways, but the fact that you're so organized as a position recruiter that you are able to line up your room time and time and time again, more than a cycle out, every single time, consistently. I don't know how he does it. It's similar to like when we talk about Clemson, or when we talked about Clemson for so long, when it was like, how do they make it so kids just don't want to go on visits to other places? Like, how do they get it so guys just shut things down? They went like a decade without having a guy flip out of their recruiting class from like 2015 to 2014, so a little less than a decade. And there might have been like one or two there, but they basically had no decommitments during that stretch. And you always say, like, how does Clemson do that? Like, they just do things differently than everyone else. Todd Hartley is kind of that way. It's like, how do you always build your tight end class a year and a half to 2 years out? Well, he's done it again, and I'm sure as long as he's at Georgia, he'll continue to keep doing it. So, yeah, Asa Wall, big time pickup from a legacy standpoint, but really a big time pickup from a talent standpoint. And, hat tip to Todd Hartley for always being able to find a way. I will also say, go check out Dogs 24/7 for an update from our national guy, Tom Loy, on Brock Williams after his visit as well. Had a couple interesting tidbits, I would say, about Brock Williams from that visit, too, that I would encourage people to check out.
Yeah, you want to see that for sure. All right, Kip, tell us about JT Wall, what the fans should know from going back. And two, what do you think of the job Georgia's done getting these legacies? And again, these are not guys that are just, well, your dad played here, so we'll bring you in. And these are some legit prospects that the Bulldogs have been able to reel in. Seems like cycle after cycle right now.
You shouldn't take legacy commits for granted. I mean, Ben was mentioning that, like, of course he loves Georgia, but there's a running back right now in college football playing for another team who's a legacy recruit in Justice Haynes that, Georgia would have loved to have, and he went a different direction. So sometimes they're in the backyard and they want to, go somewhere different. And then obviously at the same time with NIL, like, you're going to have opportunities to play at places you may not have really thought about growing up. So I will say that, his father, JT, played a position that really no longer exists in college football. I mean, we're talking about someone who, didn't get a scholarship to Georgia coming out as a fullback. There weren't a lot of fullback scholarships, but most of them were going out, out of Athens. I mean, Athens loved us some fullbacks, but JT didn't get that chance coming out. He went to Southwest Baptist and then later transferred to Georgia. But gosh, I mean, like, he was like maybe 6 foot. I would say closer to 5'11", 260 pounds. It was that was the dream for the early Mark Richt years, able to use him to just, completely open up holes in the run game. But he did have a solid senior year where, I mean, he got himself drafted as a fullback. And so I think right there that tells you, he did numbers in the weight room. He helped Georgia, have a breakout season in 2002. And I think, if I remember correctly, he had a big catch against Florida in 2002 and had one of his like 4 or 5 touchdowns in his career. But I think JT was the guy that was like, didn't leave the weight room, did the dirty work. And I think you're going to see that same mentality in the sense of bringing the, you never have to worry about him, the self-starter. And I think for Todd Hartley, getting a self-starter at tight end, where have we heard that before? That's where you get those guys to just kind of lock in. You never have to worry about them putting in the time on their own to get better. I think that's where that upside comes with Asa Wall. And also the early commits. It's almost like the kiss of death when you're the first commit in the class. I have a hard time seeing Asa Wall. I think he's going to break that cycle of the early commits not panning out for Georgia. So that's actual momentum in the 2028 class. And it actually hurts me just to say that out loud. It doesn't even seem like a real number. I assume he's going to have a flying car and a L bill when he gets to Athens because, that's a made up number. But yeah, I think Todd Hartley is still an autopilot, still, getting it done. But yeah, if you watch what Georgia did against Ole Miss at the tight end position, what tight ends not going to be, kind of impressed. And it just like having a guy like Ben would say Brock Williams in town, like probably was a good weekend. I think like he was probably, telling Bubba, run that play, during the game. And I think it's worked out pretty well for Todd Hartley in the tight end position. I think that's going to continue for Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say there was like you have a legacy tight end commit or a legacy tight end score 3 touchdowns in the game, and then you end up having a legacy tight end commit a few hours later, I guess. So, yeah, I mean, Georgia's done a great job with these legacies outside of Justice Haynes. I mean, you look at this class, not even just not legacies in like the traditional sense, even like getting PJ Dean in this class with after Jared Wilson. Like there have just been some additions in this class that I think are smart in terms of how you have to balance the entire ecosystem of it all in today's college football.
All right, going over, I was going to say too, Kipp mentioned JT Wall. NFL teams drafting fullbacks. We used to be a proper country.
I will say Josh McCray's 4th down run, I believe he was lined up at fullback on that play, if I'm not mistaken. And so, out of respect, it wasn't just Lawson Lucky using to recruit Asa Wall. It was using Josh McCray to recruit JT Wall as well.
Very, very smart. Coaching carousel check-in, and boys, we got a big one. Florida Gators come open on Sunday. They move on from Billy Napier. Now, I'm going to put y'all on the spot because I want to read this trivia from Steve Amon on Twitter. Billy Napier is now the 3rd coach in the last 5 years to be fired the morning after beating Mississippi State. I'm leaving it open to you guys. I've looked up the answer. Can you name the other 2 coaches who were fired the day after beating Mississippi State?
I can't. I mean, I guess one guess would be Ed Orgeron, maybe.
Incorrect.
This is a great stat. They're all SEC coaches?
They are. Yeah, they are all SEC coaches.
How recent are we talking here?
2020 was the first one, and 2023 was the last one.
Oh, wow. So, like, very recent.
I was going to say, is Brian Harsin one of them?
He is not. All right,
we're
at it.
This should be obvious.
One of them I knew, and Ben.
Jimbo.
There you go. You got one. I'll give you the hint that we both know this man pretty well.
Gus Malzahn.
Gus Malzahn got fired in 2020 after a trip to Starkville, and I'm not sure the circumstances with the Jimbo one, but he was fired in 2023. What an amazing! They beat Mississippi State. And
what a stat! I don't know how I'd feel being Mississippi State hearing that stat.
Not great. Not great. But we'll get into what we've done with the coaching carousel check-in where we pick our replacements for Billy Napier. But I wanted to play this clip. I asked Kirby about his reaction to Billy Napier being fired. And then 2, Billy Napier was the play caller for Florida. So does that change prep at all? What can you kind of do on that front? And this is what Kirby shared.
First of all, I have a lot of respect for Billy. I've known Billy a long time. We were on staff together at Alabama. I like Billy a lot. I think Billy is very intelligent, very well organized. His attention to detail is at a really high level. He's a guy that thinks things out really well. I think they've recruited well and done a good job. I hate it in this profession. We all know what we sign up for, and Billy understands that. As far as how that affects the matchup, and probably affects it more than a 1-week window, but in a 2-week window, there's still only so much you can do. They'll make changes, and a lot of times you inject some energy when you do that. You look across the country at guys that have had interim coaches. They've had some really big wins and had a lot of energy. I know Coach Gonzalez will do a great job. I've had respect for him, going against him many years. They've got a really good staff. So, I hate to say it, I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about us.
Kirby mentioned there Billy Gonzalez, who is the receivers coach, is now the interim head coach. This is his third different stint at Florida, so he is a guy that knows Florida well. I wanted to say this and then get y'all's opinions on it, because I do think what Kirby said there, it's very smart to point out that some of the coaching changes across the country have led to immediate changes, immediate results. Look at UCLA, Virginia Tech, UAB. I think that Florida is more dangerous against Georgia now that they fired Billy Napier. I think that this is kind of a shot in the arm for this program. I think the defense was always going to give Georgia trouble, but giving someone else a chance to call plays, I feel like that has been the biggest issue, is the Florida offense and the struggles there. Letting Billy Gonzalez run this thing, turning the offense over to somebody else. I see Florida as more dangerous given the circumstances compared to had they just stood pat with Billy Napier. Obviously, the pressure was still going to be there. They get an additional week to basically get ready, decide what they like with this offense, what they don't, what they want to change. I think that this move, if you're a Georgia fan, I'd be a little bit more nervous about this game going into it next Saturday. Kipp, what do you think? Do you think that this makes Florida more dangerous, the fact that they're rolling with interim head coach Billy Gonzalez and they're going to be going into this game looking for a big upset?
Absolutely. Now they got nothing to lose. I mean, they're going to play loose, and yeah, they're probably going to play angry as well. I think for Billy Gonzalez, it's just business as usual in that building. And that is the other thing. Like, there's only so many tweaks you can do in 2 weeks, but they're going to make as many as they can. And so that makes you a little bit less predictable. Whereas Georgia's going to try to, they also have to game plan for their other opponents for the rest of the season, as Kirby talked about today. But, they're not going to make the kind of wholesale changes that Florida will probably be making or trying to make. And Billy's going to try to put his own stamp. This is his audition for any other job he might want to get. Knowing, this isn't going to be the job he gets, but at the same time, you're putting film out there on yourself as well. And I do think he's a talented wide receivers coach. And, he's been around for a while. So I think knowing that they have very talented guys on both sides of the ball, that defensive line I talked about in the preseason being very talented, they haven't played up to their potential. That means that there is more potential for them. And then, having a guy like Eugene Wilson, they haven't been able to find ways for him to make plays in space and get yards after the catch. That was really what he was going to be touted as bringing to the offense in a big way. Well, now you're going to see, your wide receivers coach able to maximize him however you want. So I do think there's reason. Kirby, as he says, he worries about everything, and he says he worries only about what Georgia's doing. But I think he also knows, like, okay, this is an X factor here. They're going to have some juice, and we have to be prepared for that.
Ben, what do you think? Do you feel like Florida is going to be more dangerous against Georgia because they've moved on from Billy Napier?
They'll be dangerous in that Georgia's not really going to know what to expect from them offensively to start the game. Like, I saw one of Billy Gonzalez's former wide receivers, Jacob Copeland, made the comment. He was like, I already know Billy's going to air that thing out. And so it's like, I'm sure they're going to do something early in that game that they really haven't been doing much this season. I mean, when you think about, we had the conversation about Georgia's secondary. Like, I'm sure that you're going to take some shots on this Georgia secondary. And I'm not saying that Florida's going to go empty and go 5 wide. And they, of course, have a really good running back, so they're going to try and run the ball. But I'm just saying, I would think Billy Gonzalez is going to do something different or weird that, as we've seen so far this season, Georgia kind of lets teams do what they want to do early in games, and then they figure it out and game plan around that. I think that it wouldn't be unlikely to see that. What I will say is I don't know how much Billy Gonzalez was calling plays at any point during all of this. But Kirby Smart's obviously run up against Billy Gonzalez just about as much as any wide receivers coach that he's gone up against during his time. I mean, he's at Florida, at Florida and LSU when Kirby Smart is at Alabama. He's at Mississippi State when Kirby Smart's at Alabama, and then when he's at Georgia, and then he's been at Florida really since 2018, minus 1 year in 2022. So Kirby Smart's seen Billy Gonzalez, very familiar with Billy Gonzalez. That's going to help Georgia. I think the bigger there's the energy, the shot in the arm, whatever, that we have seen. A team like UAB has had some of that already this season. There is also and I know Billy Napier wasn't necessarily beloved by Florida fans for this, but like when you lose your head coach, there are certain organizational things that are probably not going to be as sharp. Like there's certain communication issues that you're going to run into. There's going to be, things in practice that get overlooked because they're just not operationally going to be as fluid as they were when they had the guy who's been the head coach for the last 4 years. That said, I know that wasn't always where Billy Napier's strong suit was viewed as being at times during his Florida career, so maybe it won't have that much of a difference. But quite frankly, Florida was going to present challenges, period, because DJ Lagway does have talent, because they do have receivers that can make plays, because they have a pretty solid offensive line, and Jaden Ball is one of the more talented running backs in the league, because they do have a defensive front that generates pressure, and they've got DBs that have some pretty good ball skills and make plays. They're not a perfect football team, obviously. That's why their coach has been fired, but they've got the pieces that should have scared you the whole time anyway.
Florida going into the Georgia game with an interim coach for the third time. Galen Hall and Gary Darnell in the 80s. They went 1-1 against Georgia, so that will be very interesting. So we'll get into the regular coaching carousel check-in we do, and going to have kind of a meeting here, guys. So we've done in the past, when we've done a specific job, okay, only one of us can have a coach for that job. Do we think if someone has been picked for another job, he is available for this? I'm kind of leaning toward we can't pick someone who's been picked for another job, but I want to hear, we're going to have this meeting live on this show. What do y'all want to do?
I think you can't pick someone that you've already picked for another job, but like if you pick someone for that job, Kipp or I should still be able to pick them for a different job.
I think I'm okay with that, Kipp. What do you think?
I mean, we're making the rules as we go along here. We could have done this off the air and locked this in. We're at this point where there's so many openings. I'm gonna need
I don't even remember who I picked.
Yeah, I need you to actually tally up who all we've picked. But I feel with this specific, opening, we're for the most part safe because no offense to even Penn State, but like this seems like this job is working with a different kind of list than what the other ones have. I mean, Florida's won 2 titles. I mean, Penn State hasn't had a title since 1986, okay? Like, Penn State, I mean, Florida has 2 titles since the last Texas national championship. Like, I think it also goes to just today, like, we're living in this, the results-based situation, of capitalism, where you have to continue to do better and better. And, like, Florida's a weird program to where, you have to get them in the title hunt within a couple years. But, I don't know, the results, the landscape's changed so much to where I just think the expectations are kind of crazy. So it kind of changes that job and how good of a job Florida is. So maybe I got to dial it back a little bit and say that Florida seems like a better job on paper, but I don't think any of the jobs in the state of Florida are. I mean, the 80s and 90s aren't coming back.
All right, we will operate where you can pick a coach that one of the other 2 co-hosts picked, but it can't be someone you have filled for another job. And hopefully I'll be more organized the next time we do this. I'll have a graphic where we'll kind of know who is available. I'll start with you, Kipp, since you gave such a brilliant Florida explanation. All right, give me your pick. Who does Florida hire to replace Billy Napier full-time?
I think it's pretty clear who choice 1 is going to be. I want to go just a different direction because there's someone who I think should just at least get an interview for the job, and I think he'd do really well. And that's Fran Brown at Syracuse. I think if he got that job, you want to talk about coaches that would like really scare Kirby? Like everyone's talking about the game that just happened and what he could do there. It's not a huge jump. I mean, in talent level right now. So I kind of push back against whether it's even something that like is worth it for him. But I think Fran Brown would kill it at Florida. Like if his quarterback doesn't go down, we're still talking about Syracuse. I mean, like some of the teams that are in the top 10, top 20 right now, Syracuse would definitely still be in the mix. So I think he should get an interview. And I think the recruiting, putting together an elite roster with what Florida is supposedly bringing to the table, I think that is the hire that the rest of the SEC would be really worried about if it happened.
All right, Ben, your turn. Who do you think Florida winds up hiring?
Well, I do think Florida's an interesting case study in how good is any job nowadays. And like, I mean, literally any job. Like, I think that everyone thinks that their school's job, like in today's college football, everybody's got money and everybody has access to the portal. And so if you are taking a new job, like I think about Lane Kiffin right now, like he's wanted to take big, quote unquote, bigger SEC jobs at times, or he's flirted with it and then hasn't for whatever reason. And like Florida traditionally would be the job that Lane Kiffin would jump to take because it is a big time job that wins championships in a recruiting hotbed, and it would make sense. I just don't know that that's the way to win in college football anymore. Like, I think that I talked about this when I was not convicted in picking Matt Rule to go to Penn State, where it's like, it sounds so easy to just uproot your program and go do it somewhere else. It's not that easy anymore. All the guys that are at your new school can leave, and you have to completely overhaul your roster. And if you whiff on one or two portal cycles in that program building stretch, you're screwed. And I think that coaches realize the challenge and the difference in what it means to start a new job at a new place now, and that you don't just have this overwhelming advantage at a place like Florida or Georgia or Alabama or Ohio State. Like, yeah, few of those programs are in a good place right now because they had good foundations already set in place when this new world came about. But it's hard. So I think that Florida is going to end up going the G5 route again. And look, two of their last three coaches they've hired were Louisiana's coach and Colorado State's coach. And I know that they might say, well, that's the problem. That's why you have to swing bigger and go get a bigger answer. I just don't know that answer is going to present itself. Like, Lane they'll go after. They probably think they're too good for James Franklin, even though I don't think that they are. I think James Franklin would be a really good hire for them. Eli Drinkowitz, I think that they might think they're too good for Eli Drinkowitz. I think that would be a really good hire for them. Marcus Freeman's not leaving Notre Dame for Florida, and I don't know why that keeps getting brought up. I'm going to go with a guy, though, that beat them this season, and that's Alex Golesh. And he's in the state of Florida. He knows how to recruit that area already. We've seen with Tennessee's offense that if you put the right pieces together, you make it pretty hard for anyone other than elite talent on defense to be able to stop you. And yeah, does that maybe cap your ceiling a little bit at times when you go up against an Alabama or a Georgia if they have elite players on defense? Sure, but I think that in the new day and age of college football, it's going to be that much harder to have that much elite talent stacked on the defensive side of the ball that I think it helps. If people will use the phrase, it's a gimmicky offense, and they do that with Tennessee sometimes. I'm not going to push back on the fact that there is a gimmickiness into how it operates, but it's so effective against such a high percentage of Tennessee's roster every year. I think that Florida, they're sitting here in this coaching search saying, how do we beat Georgia? How do we beat Alabama? I think right now they should be saying, how do we beat Tennessee? Like, how do we get to the point where we are a consistent 9-10 flirting with the playoffs every year caliber of football team? And I think Alex Golesh is someone that has done it at Tennessee. He has now done it at the G5 level. He's now beaten Florida heads up this season. So I think he's proven enough to be able to do that. And I don't think it's going to be their first choice by any means. But I just think that some of their higher up the board choices, they're not living in a realistic world in terms of who would want to take and I've been having this conversation with Georgia too. Like if Georgia job were to open up, everyone thinks that someone's just, gonna jump off for the Georgia job. It's a great job. And like Alabama had it with Kalen DeBoer, where you went and got a coach at a Big Ten school that played for a national championship. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying like coaches are not going to be job jumping the way that they have in the past, especially if they're already in the Big Ten or the SEC right now.
You kind of just did a 1-to-1 Florida to Georgia comparison there. You think that Georgia would have the same issues that Florida would have? Like
I wasn't doing a 1-to-1. I'd say like a 1 to 1.5. It was like every school with an opening right now is going to think that the best coach that's available is going to want to come coach there. And I just don't think that that's how the world works anymore because of how hard it is to retain your roster and then rebuild. Not saying that it would be impossible or that there wouldn't be, a Dan Lanning or something like that wouldn't want to come take the Georgia job. I'm just saying like everyone always does this exercise of like, who is this proven head coach that we want to go and get? And it's like, go look at these schools that have been successful.
How many,
or even the ones that are right now,
Georgia down? How many candidates would turn the Georgia job down right now? And then how many do you think turn Florida down before they get to Alex Golesh? Like that's kind of where my comparison would be. Like maybe 3 to 5, like maybe 3 guys turn Georgia down. Like, and there's only 4 guys that they would even consider. But
I was using Georgia as an extreme example as to say people talk about Georgia as it's the best college football job in the world. And I don't disagree with that. I think it's a spectacular job. I also think if you are a head coach at a program that is already established, uprooting that to go to a job that you think might be a little bit better in this day and age when everybody's got millions and millions of dollars to be able to spend, it just doesn't have quite the same effect as it would have 5 years ago. But again, I'm not comparing the Georgia and the Florida job right now. I just wanted to use Georgia as an example as to say, like, I don't think Marcus Freeman would leave Notre Dame for the Georgia job as an example. Like his name would get floated out there and it's like, he's the Notre Dame head coach, like uprooting all of that and then coming and being the Georgia head coach. Like, I just don't think you're going to do that. Like Cignetti, everyone kept throwing his name out there. It's like, I think Cignetti's just fine at Indiana. So it's like, why would he go anywhere else when it's like Indiana has $15 million now? Yeah, maybe if you're a high school driven program, you want to be in a slightly better recruiting hotbed than Indiana, but Cignetti's not a high school driven program. He doesn't run a high school driven program, so he doesn't necessarily have to do that. So I just think it's changed in terms of what coaches would want certain jobs and what's actually a better job substantially than other jobs.
So I have to do the funniest thing possible after that 15 minutes and just say I'm picking Lane Kiffin to jump.
I mean, that's the easy money right there. I think it's already his job. I mean, and it's going to be his choice whether they get the candidate too.
I want to ask you for real though, Ben. I feel like this is a different situation compared to the Auburn job that he was offered a few years ago. I think Florida would be a better job than Auburn, but I wanted your opinion on it.
It is a better job. I mean, you're not having to compete with Alabama in your own state for starters. They've been more consistently successful over the last decade and a half, even though neither of them have been particularly. It's an important decision for Florida. They got to get this one right, because if they go another 4 years where they try and run the same experiment that they just ran with Billy Napier or Dan Mullen or Jim McElwain, where they give them a little bit of a leash, but they're not getting a full leash, and then things are over before they get started. It's like we're going to be going on, 25 years since Florida's been winning an SEC championship. And at that point, it's like we do start to have a question about like how good of a job is that really, or was it a 10, 15 year stretch and Steve Spurrier and Urban Meyer made it seem like a way better job than it actually was. I don't know.
All right, we'll go through the other job that opened Sunday quickly. Jay Norvell out at Colorado State. This one, a lot of people think is one of the better group of 5 jobs that is open, but I'll throw out a name to get us going. A dear cousin, we're actually not related, Jay Hill, the defensive coordinator at BYU. He was a head coach at Weber State for quite a while. BYU, I think, is 7-0 now. They've been very successful. He strikes me as a guy that is going to get a pretty good head coaching job at the group of 5 level. So I'm going to give it to Jay Hill and have a little family out there in Fort Collins. That'll be nice to maybe get some Rams intel going forward. Ben, you want to venture a name? You want to throw out a guess for Colorado State?
I have no idea who would even be a candidate for this job, Jordan, to be honest with you. Like I was like looking up that region of the country and being like, all right, who is head coaches at certain jobs in that region of the country that are having good years where they might. I have no idea, Jordan. I don't even have an answer for you. I'm still going to continue thinking about it.
They have 2 alum in the coaching ranks. I'm choosing one of them. You can have the other one. They got Tony Alford. I mean,
okay.
He played there. He's already interviewed for the job before, and he's already said he wanted the job. So, like, if that's the easy money for that one, it would be okay. Let's circle back around, and give him the shot. I like Lane's brother, Chris Kiffin. I think if you're going to go a little bit off the wall, he played defensive tackle for Colorado State, and I mean he hasn't had head coaching experience. That's the huge question, and he's a defensive line coach. So yeah, there's a little bit of a bump there, but there are those ties to Colorado State. So I think if Tony offered it. If it doesn't work out, trying to get him in the mix, I think Chris Kiffin's probably one of the next calls they make.
I'll make a pick that's not based. I mean, it's not going to happen, but it just has me thinking about it. Like, he's a guy that's coached in that area. He's been, I think he coached at UNLV for a while. He's obviously having a lot of recruiting success at Sacramento State right now. So I'll go with Brennan Marion, trying to make that jump up through the coaching ranks. He's someone that I think would like to be a big time head coach one day. So if Colorado State is the type of job that you're saying it is, Jordan, I'll say that he wants to make that leap.
I like it. I think that's definitely within the realm of possibility. We'll follow along, and like I said, I'll get to work on a graphic so we can keep up with who we've picked. Georgia Men's Basketball Minute, really cool Monday. Mike White invited the media in for a film session. Got to watch a big chunk of practice. I wound up having to leave leave a few minutes before they got done. Coming off the heels of an exhibition last week, I believe it was 65-61 win over Georgia State. Liked what I saw on the whole. Couple of quick things. They got to figure out three-point shooting. They struggled against Georgia State. Wasn't necessarily impressed with how they shot it on Monday during practice, but I understand, that's kind of a small sample size, and I'd been told that they'd shot the ball much better from the perimeter before the exhibition. Really like Jeremiah Wilkinson. This Cal transfer, I think he's going to make a lot of plays. I think he's going to be one of the leading scorers on this team. And shout out one other guy, Kareem Stagg. I think that he's one of 3 freshmen on this team, and I think that everybody's sort of been focused on Jake Wilkins, Dominique's son, and Jake's really good. But I think that Kareem Stagg, he is ready to make an instant impact, to be a guy we see a lot of. Probably not going to start, but I think you'll see him play some quality minutes. And excited for Sunday. They're going to have a home exhibition against Troy. I'll be there for that, so keep an eye out for that. And get ready, man, because Georgia basketball is right around the corner. All right, while we're talking basketball, Kipp, Wednesday night, Hawks, Raptors. We'll get to see Ace and Newell, so there's that Georgia tie. How are we feeling about that game, but also the Hawks going into this season?
I'm pumped, guys. I'm telling you, I can't see myself being disappointed this season at all. I think my expectations, I've set the bar at 5 seed. It's kind of a middle ground to where if they're a top 4 seed, awesome. But right at the 5 is where I think the expectations should be, because they're still ridiculously young. Pumped about that contract extension for Dyson Daniels, man. 4 years, $100 million. I know Dwight Howard was out there posting about how he never got $100 million. But you know what? With the cap space right now, I think it was a great deal. him and Jalen Johnson will be becoming free agents around the same time. But I think toward the end of the contract, it's going to look like an even better deal. But yeah, this is it. Like you got Kristaps Porzingis coming in there, arguably the best player Trae Young's ever had on his team. You've built a roster with 3-point shooters and defenders around him. This is it. It's prove it time. So I think this is a roster built pretty well to compete. I think the one thing that I still worry about is Trae Young's shooting. It did not look good in the preseason. In fact, it looked downright terrible in the preseason. So we were both having similar, preseason thoughts from watching Georgia and the Hawks. That's going to be how far this team goes. Is can Trae actually get back to being a league average 3-point shooter? That's going to be the key. But I do think that they're going to give a lot of teams trouble this season. They're going to be hell to play.
Ben, we talked about on the Auburn Observer podcast that, the Hawks, they finally won that Luka trade. They got a little bit of momentum. How are you feeling about them going into this year?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you set the record straight there, Jordan. I hate that I'm always the one that has to say that the Hawks officially won that Luka trade now that Dallas didn't want him. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited about the year. It's also a kind of a prove it year, I would say. I mean, to Kipp's point, putting some really good pieces around Trae. I'm excited about Luke Kennard, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, some big additions this offseason. This is clearly a go see what you can do. And if it doesn't work out, like Kipp's put that bar at 5, if the Hawks make the playoffs, things will be fine. If the Hawks are in another play-in game, I think that we'll be having a much different conversation next offseason about what this Hawks team is.
They might show up in our coaching carousel check-in. That's all there is to say.
And probably the star player check-in as well, if I were to guess.
Well, we'll end it right there. I appreciate Kipp and Ben for popping on. Thanks to everyone who watched this live, everyone who is watching or listening to it after the fact. Please go to Dogs 24/7 and subscribe. In the middle of football season, basketball season's less than a month away. Baseball season, baseball is scrimmaging. Olivia Sayer's been out there following along and giving the folks on Dogs 24/7 updates there, so subscribe for that. Subscribe to the Junkyard Dawgcast wherever you get your podcast. Please rate and review. That helps us a ton. Go check out our YouTube, Dogs 24/7. Go check out our TikTok. Lots of good content. Had to throw Kirby Smart taking a shot at Lane on the TikTok. A little bit of hot yoga talk at the very end of Saturday night. So we'll end the episode right there. For Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.